Hey everybody, welcome back to the C23 Labs channel, where we dive deep on everything involving learning tattooing and becoming better tattoo artists. I'm your host, Oscar Akermo, and today we're looking into one of my live stream lessons on probably the #1 secret to understanding and creating great black and gray realism portraits and realism tattoos. So I remember Jose posted this tattoo here for some feedback, and I thought this would be a perfect demonstration of how to think when you're doing a portrait, a realistic portrait like this. In this case, this looks like a statue, like Hades or something. It's pretty clearly AI generated, which is really cool. But yeah, he asked for some feedback on what I think could be better with this tattoo. And the #1 piece of feedback that I have would be to start thinking about reading your reference image a little bit differently. What's wrong with this tattoo here is basically that I think the tonal balances are very off. If we look at the reference here, we can see that this reference has clearly a light source coming from here, about hitting the face and creating highlights around the face and the beard here, and this whole like right side of his face more or less. This whole side of the face here is in light. That means that this side of the face is in darkness. And we can see that pretty clearly in the reference. If we look here, I'm just going to hold my color dropper around here, and we can see that, yeah, there's a lot of pure black and then some very dark gray. There are still details in here, like you can still see his eyes through the darkness here. But generally speaking, this whole side of the face is in pure darkness. So if I actually bring up our little grayscale system, this is a grayscale based on numbers 0 to 10. 0 is pure black and 10 is pure white. And so 1, 2, and 3, I would say, are the tones that Jose missed out on in this tattoo a lot. It's easy to get too busy and too focused on the detail work when you're tattooing. You can be down here in the details working like, oh, so important that I'm capturing all these details. But what we forget when we do that is actually to zoom out sometimes and look at the big picture. So if we look at the big picture, the shapes that we have to capture are essentially these shapes. And I'm gonna give a demonstration on, I'm gonna demonstrate a little trick on what you can do to help yourself think about the big picture and the details in a bit. But yeah, so if we look at this here, if we zoom out a little bit and we just divide this reference image into a few basic building blocks, we'll see that pretty much this whole section is all in darkness. Same here. Here we have a big block of darkness. There are basically no highlights here. And then we have some smaller ones, right? If we zoom out a lot, we can see that, okay, most areas within this red that I highlighted here are pretty much all here. It's between a 0, 1, 2, and 3 on this 10 grade scale, okay? And then on the light side, we have obviously pure white or pure skin if we were tattooing it. And then we have a bunch of areas with some middle tones, mid to lights. And that's where 4 to 10 would exist. But in order for us to like really capture this and really capture it as a realistic tattoo and for it to look really three-dimensional, it's very important that we aren't afraid of making the dark side properly dark. So as you can see here on the chin here of his face and the eye, there are no light tones. There are only tones between 0 and 3. And so if we look at the tattoo here, Jose left a lot of light tones. In fact, way too many light tones. This whole side of the face isn't dark enough in comparison to the light side of the face. That flattens the image because the difference between this side and this side isn't big enough. So the image just looks kind of flat. And I think it's very easy for this to happen when you're too zoomed in and too worried about these little details all the time. You forget about thinking about the big picture. And the big picture tells us that this whole side needs to be super dark. And here, these super, super dark details here. All right. So one thing that I like to do is to squint with my eyes. You do this, you know, so that everything kind of gets blurry. Whatever you look at gets really blurry. And I look at the image to sort of help myself divide the image into these like simple building blocks. Where are the dark areas? Where are the light areas? Where are the mid areas? So a good way to do this is actually by kind of, yeah, either squinting with your eyes, or you could even blur the image a little bit. Like if I blur the image here, what shapes do we have left? Here, dark, dark, and then this whole side. Those are the sections that need to be super dark. And if we capture that, the piece will look three-dimensional because this is how nature and reality works. If you have an object and the side that is facing the light, it'll be the brightest. You see my face here. This is where the light hits. And on this side of my face, there is a shadow. There is no light that can reach there. So it needs to be really dark. And we really need to trust our reference images to capture this. And we need to trust the images and do kind of what they tell us to do. And in this case, this reference image here is telling us we need to make this whole side of the face super dark, including here. And it's very easy for us to sort of like say, okay, this whole side of the face, there are no tones that exists outside of 0 and 3. So I have to take out all these tones. It doesn't mean you have to make it all black, because black is 0, but there are so many little tone variations at 1 to 3. And these tone variations are super important for us to capture. A lot of tattooers forget about those. They see a very dark part and it's all dark, or they don't make it dark enough because they are scared to make something too dark, perhaps. But we need contrast in our tattoos. So now I'm gonna try to read this image again, and I'm only gonna work on the big picture because Jose made some really nice details. So like all the basic shapes and tones are there. I just need to make that whole left side of the face and part of the hair here darker. And after I've done that, it should look a bit more 3D and a bit more realistic. Let's give it a try. All right, let's see. I have my sketching pen. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the cheek here. We can see that, yeah, that whole cheek and the hair here, we're going to take out all those light tones. So I'm going to start right here. Still some details in here, like we can see that there are hair strands. And then I'm going to do here, okay. It gets a little bit lighter around here, but still, that's like a 4, maximum of 4 on the scale up here. So actually I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this whole brush and I'm going to just gently cover the whole area in some tone, just to take out all the skin tone, because we know for sure we're not going to have any. And then some pure black here. Just like becoming very accurate with identifying tones and then accurate in tattooing them. Like I see a number 1 on the tone and I'm gonna get exactly number 1. If it's a number 2 or a number 3 on the scale, it's done. You failed. So I want to really, first of all, get good at identifying the correct tones and then being able to tattoo them and capture the right tone. And I'm just gonna sketch this here pretty quick, just to see if we can improve this a little bit by just adjusting the tones and just increase the contrast in this tattoo here. Okay, now let's take a look at this part of the beard. Here we have a light part. That is like a 4-ish. Yeah, 4, 5-ish. And here he left it like more of a 7. It's way, way, way too light. So we got to make that darker. This whole part of the beard actually needs to be a lot darker. Oops. So there's nothing lighter than a 4 on this side of the beard, but there are details in there. So I'm just going to go over everything and make it all a little bit darker. And then the same thing here on this whole part of the beard. If you look, there we go. And then there's a really dark section there. It's like a 1 or a 2. And then in here, pure black. Okay, I'm going to do it quickly here. I think you get the idea, right? Like trusting your reference is so important and being very accurate with the details. Okay, and then here there's actually a nice little cast shadow like that. And then this whole part, okay, it's dark because that leads up into a little highlight. This part of the beard here, let's see. It's like a lot of it is just being like very objective. Like just look at the reference and trust what it tells you and just do exactly what it tells you and you can't fail. Okay, let's work on this section of the hair here. Okay, there's pretty much a lot of black there, or 1. There are many little tonal variations here. There's some pure black here, and then some there, and then pure black here, pure black here. Okay, then I'm gonna move that there. We may not address all of the sections in this tattoo, it would take too long, but just want to do enough for this tattoo to get just over that edge where it starts to look really realistic and true to the reference. Okay, so a big part in making a good realism tattoo happens, and actually probably the more important part of making a really good realism tattoo like this happens when you do the stencil. You have to mark up the shades that you see in a way that's going to make it really easy for you to just follow the reference later on. And so when you're stenciling hair, for example, you shouldn't think about stenciling hair like this, like you're drawing the hair straws. You should just worry about and think about marking up the fields of tone that you see. So here I have a field of tone, cool. And then maybe within that I have that section here, a little bit darker. And then I have this whole section here. And then I have this section, that section. So I'm kind of discriminating tones from each other. I'm not thinking about that this is hair. I'm just thinking about this is a shape and it has a certain tone. So I'm just marking up that thing. So here, for example, within this shape, we have a few tones. We have a pretty much pure black right here. And then that goes into a lighter, like a 2, 3. So within that shape, we have a few different ones. So I'm not gonna just draw a line here. I want to be even more specific. I want to identify the tones. So no hair, only shapes and tones. And then basically when you tattoo it, you just have to fill in those shapes and tones that you marked out. Okay, where can we work? We could probably, work on the eye socket here a little bit to make that a little more realistic. We can see here that there's like this shadow that divides this really dark section of the eye to this very highlighted part. So I'm going to try to capture that. See if we can get it all on the same screen. And it's pretty much like a 1-2 in here with some pure black details. And then all of this section of his eyebrow is like in total darkness. So we got to make that nice and pure black in those creases. And then make it all dark enough inside of there. And here, those little wrinkles here, we can't just leave them as lines. They are actually little shades with tone, and they fade, you know, they're kind of soft at the end. Like you get a little bit of a soft ending there, and they have shades on both sides. It's not just a hard line. When we leave hard lines like that, it kind of looks like a line. It doesn't look 3D. So we have to actually fix those a little bit too. I'm going to try here. I don't use the best brush for this right now, but I'm just going to try to make this feel a bit softer and have those little shaded variations in there to feel more three-dimensional. And then on the eyelid, it's actually a lot more shaded there too. It can't be this sharp. We can see in the reference that it's actually quite soft because there's a soft shape. And yes, there are some highlights on the lower eyelids there. And if I'm just going to hold my dropper tool right on the eye, it's like around a 4 or 5 in there. So I'm going to try to make that a little darker, make it nice and soft in there. Also, like leaving too hard edges, like sharp edges, will give away, you know, that this is not perfectly realistic or like perfectly educated in the way it was done by the artist. We got to be able to discern sharp edges, like right here, and softer edges, like right down here by the eyelid. There's no like sharp lines here. Everything's kind of soft. Okay, let's see. Where else do we have? Yeah, same thing here in the eye, actually, on this side. It's a softer shade. And here we still have that like hard line. It's got to be a little softer. There's a little transition going on there. And once you capture all those, that's when you, wow, like the piece comes to life, really. Okay, let's see. You see, I keep zooming out because I want to keep checking in on the big picture. How are we looking in the big picture? I can see that up here. In the hair, we need some. And then this whole section here should be in shadow and darkness. Like that whole upper part of the ear here needs shadow. And we left a lot of skin here. So let's fix that. And I think after that, there are some still like small details that we need to go into. But I think just after fixing these parts of the hair here, we'll be in a much, much better place. So you can see if I hold my dropper, that's a 1, 2. Okay, so I'm going to make this section here 1, 2. Oh, and then there's this here too. There's a bunch of areas here that you missed. Let's see if we can, I'm just going to do that a little bit roughly. Okay, so yeah, until you start becoming really, really analytical and objective with your reference images like this, you're not going to make nice realism work. I can see that Jose is really good at shading, like the pepper shading and everything, like the technique is good, but your knowledge about how to read a reference and how to create a stencil still needs a lot of work. It's all in the mind, like your knowledge about how to read them. It's not all about how well you can shade. It's about how well you can read these references. But I can say that somebody like Jose with good shading skills, like he's making soft shading, clean lines, if you just work on understanding realism and understanding how to break down an image into these stencils and create a good stencil for yourself and then read that, you will be creating amazing realism tattoos in a week. I'm telling you. But we have to learn how to read a stencil. Let's see here. Okay, right, we have actually a highlight here that should have been there, but fuck it. Okay, and then this part here. Here we have this interesting, again, like a little cast shadow, like this section here. That straight line there, that's a shadow. And it's kind of missing here. It should be like there, connecting to that shape. So let's fix that. And then inside of it, we have some pure black hair lines, like that. And then everything else is pretty much like a 1 or a 2. Even darker at some parts. Okay, and yeah, as you can see here, he kind of went off the stencil a lot, and probably because the stencil was too confusing. You didn't capture the right shapes. So when you started tattooing this, it was too confusing to look at this hair and then look at your stencil because they didn't match. And the stencil actually probably made it really difficult for yourself because you didn't stencil it in the right way, because you didn't think of the realism piece in the right way when you stenciled it. But anyway, let's see here. We're about to see if this is actually kind of half done now and see if we made any improvements to this piece. All right, I mean, as you can see, my Procreate brush doesn't match the shading, so use your imagination a little bit here. Actually, now that I zoom out and I compare the images, this whole section here needs probably a little more love. I really want to make a clear distinction between the right side and the left side, like the dark side of his face and the left side. Lips here could be a little darker because it's all in proper shadow. And yeah, once you start looking at this, like for example here, you know, you put white here, white ink, but the reference, yes, it's light, but it's not white, man. White, pure white, I would say, is up here, and here is more like what? Like an 8 or a 9. So no white here. Yeah, and actually this whole section there, you see, there's no skin tone left there. And then here we have an interesting one, like the whole nasolabial fold that everybody has here. That's a round shape, right? So it's darker at the beginning and then becoming a shade going that way. So we have this like dark to light. And if you capture that, it will really look three-dimensional. But yeah, here it's just kind of like flat. So let's see if we can do something about that. And I can see also that you made a bit of a mistake here. I'm gonna look at this. I'm gonna try to, let's do something like this here. I'm gonna just steal that color and we're gonna brighten this whole part up here. All right, I'm not sure how this is gonna look now when I'm drawing on top of something that's tattooed. It may look super muddy and dirty, but yeah, at least you get the idea. Didn't make it better. Yeah. Anyway, so I really hope that you get the idea of what I'm talking about here. Let's just do one last part right there. That would create a lot of nice shape for us. There we are. And then, yeah, there are a lot of sections that I could go into here, but yeah, something like here. Okay, let's compare. I'm going to turn off the layer that I used, or sorry, the layer that I just drew on, and we can compare the results and see what we think. This is Jose's, and this is after I added just some dark parts. If we zoom out a lot, how does that look? See if you can kind of squint with your eyes a bit so the details disappear, and see which one looks more three-dimensional. You see, all I'm doing is capturing those dark areas so that they are as dark as they need to be in relation to the right parts. And it's all about learning how to read tones. I really hope this is helpful. I'll see you in the next video. Hope you've enjoyed watching this seminar. If you're looking for more lessons and seminars like this, you can visit c23labs.io, where you can access things like our online communities, where you can get your tattoos critiqued by me and my team. You can also get guided roadmaps and seminars on learning tattoo designing, and how to manage and grow your social media and learn critical business skills as a tattoo artist. See you again in the next lesson.